Hi folks, welcome to your Fat X Summer Catch-Up Part 2 pod, coming to you in association with the Jersnet microphone and with the Hal David and Burt Bacharach songs that are more famous than the film they were written for. My name's Alec Anderson. I'm sick of this England shit. It's pissing down. We are drowned. And this is, as I say, it's the second part of the pod. I started trying to cram in everything that has occurred that I need to chat about in one pod earlier today. It was never going to happen. I was going to talk about my attitude towards the final of Euro 2024 and what England had achieved in the whole of Euro 2024, the recognition they weren't getting for getting to their first ever major final on foreign soil. I was just going to use that as a starter to then segue into what's been happening with Rangers in the 2 weeks since I last was on this here pod, but it turned into a 43-minute rant, mostly about England. I left you a little trivia question to which I do not know the answer. Again, something you could be thinking about during this pod. I have seen Lawrence Shankland scoring for Queen's Park against Rangers in the league at Hampden. I've seen him scoring for Hearts in the League Cup semi-final against Rangers at Hampden, and I've seen him scoring for Scotland at Hampden. I was at that friendly, Scotland 2, Finland 2, just before Scotland went off to the Euros. So I can't think of anybody else I've seen scoring for two different Scottish clubs and the Scotland national team, all at the National Stadium. And if he comes to Rangers, if he does sign for Rangers during this here summer, well, he's going to play at Hampden, isn't he? He's going to play, you would like to think, against Motherwell, against Ross County, against whoever we meet in Europe, and against whoever we get in the League Cup. So there's a good chance he could score for three different club sides and the national team at the National Stadium. Has anybody else done that? Has anybody else done the two club sides of the national team? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. That's something for you to ponder while I rant on and try and complete it, because I need to get it out of my system. What I've realised is anybody with any kind of sense, anybody with any media savvy, anybody who knows the first thing about podcasting would be trying to keep the pods, quick, snappy, 20 minutes, certainly less than half an hour anyway. It just puts people off when they're consistently approaching the hour mark. The sound of one mouth yapping is not the most attractive prospect when you've got so much to choose from on the old YouTube these days. But I go, but it's the Tony Wilson thing, when he saw Joy Division, I think when they were still Warsaw at the time, it was a battle of the bands kind of thing. He saw them at, and he talks about how they weren't the most talented, they certainly weren't the most good looking, they weren't the most musical of all the bands that were there, but they were there because they had no choice. That's what I say, they had no choice. They just had to be up there doing their music, even if there was better bands there, more good looking bands, more ambitious, more media savvy bands, more financially savvy bands up there. Didn't matter. They just had to be there. That's the thing with me. I just need to get this stuff in my system. I need to share it, and hopefully, if you believe that, if you can fake the sincerity, that's the way I'm going to get to the top and be bigger than Heart and Hand, Jersnet, the Rangers Review, all put together. I'll blow it out of the water. I'll make a fortune out of this massive sponsorship I'm going to get. If you can fake the sincerity, that's what it's all about. To do that, it helps to be really over emotional, and I'm going to do that throughout the course of this pod, all about Hampden. There's a lot to talk about. Rangers are at St Andrews tonight as I'm recording this. By the time you see this, if you can be bothered watching it at all, the game's probably going to be over. Rangers are playing Birmingham City tonight, Wednesday. And Saturday there we played Manchester United at Murrayfield. We've got lots of transfer news that's not happening. Rumour after rumour, Goldson and Tavernier seem to be on the verge of leaving, but it's yet to be confirmed. More rumours about Lawrence Shankland coming. There's various other players. There's various other positions we need to fill. Quite frankly, I think we need to be signing before this season starts properly, competitively, 2024, 2025. And we're running out of time. You'll have seen in the Rangers Review. We're running out of time because of the date that you've got to get your squad in to UEFA for the third qualifying round of the Champions League, which is towards the end of the first week in August. But I think we need, at this point in time, two centre-halves, one sitting midfielder, one number 10, a 10, at least one wide player, right or left, and two strikers. More players are going to have to be leaving. There's talk that Fiorentina are after Yanis Hadji. Rangers are supposed to be looking for £3 million. I think we'd take two, if not 1.5. His performance at the Euros this summer for Romania, it wasn't particularly impressive. It wasn't terrible either, but he's definitely an icon. He definitely is a bit of a god because of his dad, obviously, but he's a real leader there for the Romanian national team. And so I think there's something to be marketed there, if nothing else. And I think we should be able to make some money back on him. Todd Cantwell, lots of talk about how he's not around the team just now, not around the Rangers squad just now, never seemed to get on with the manager. He could be off ski, maybe get some money back from him to like a championship level in England. Connor Goldson, Cyprus, looks like Aris Limassol are after him. James Tavernier, Trabzonspor. I think that he sorted out personal terms with it. This is the rumours from fairly legitimate sources. Just could be complete nonsense. He seems to have sorted out personal terms. The clubs, there's just a bit of disparity in what the clubs think is an appropriate transfer fee for a man who is, for me, a legend. And I'm leaving it until Tav leaves, until he's actually officially gone, before I hit you with the 15-hour pod all about James Tavernier and justifying my position on that man. But this is the kind of stuff that's going around just now. I need to catch up with you. But in between times, in amongst all that, because I've been away on holiday, I was down in England last week, downstairs in North Yorkshire, as I mentioned in the previous pod. You should watch, if you can watch pod number 1, part 1 of the 2 pods I'm doing today. Do that, even just for the intro, just to see what I'm supposed to be talking about in general. But I was down in England last week, and I come back up on Friday. I did come back on Friday, and we'd hired a car, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We stayed in a wee cottage down there, and it was home from home. Ripon, beautiful market town, historic market town, lovely cathedral, went to that. There's a wee kind of ceremony goes on every night, 9 o'clock every night, in the market square in Ripon, where it's the wakeman. He comes out, and it was a horn, an ox's horn, that was gifted to the town of Ripon by Alfred the Great, allegedly in 886. There's been a few horns replacements since then, but this guy comes and he stands at the bottom of this monument in the middle of the square, and he goes round the 4 corners of it and blows at 9 o'clock. There's a whole convoluted reason for this little ceremony, but it's really good. It's smashing. And it's very square. It's like a kind of football pitch, but it's the square dimensions, but there's a square of buildings around it. A bit like the shape of Ibrox just now. The traditional shape of, not the traditional shape of Ibrox, but the shape Ibrox has been since Willie Waddle remodelled our beautiful stadium. Went to Birmingham, the Birmingham Stones. Amazing, these kind of, is it granite, salt granite? They've been worn down over the millennia. These amazing standing stones, and really, it's just like something out the what do you call it, the Grand Canyon, the kind of Monument Valley, even in America. But it's in Yorkshire. Went to Pateley Bridge, beautiful wee town. Pateley Bridge, went there. A lot of bikers, a lot of cafes. They all shut at 2:30. We got there at 2:45. All these beautiful things. And all I could think when I got back home was, did the people that we hired the cottage from like the way I did the recycling? It's an age thing. That's all I wanted to know. I was kind of looking for a feedback form, not just supposed to give them feedback. What did you think of the place? But I was actually wanting them to get back in touch with me and say, "Aye, Alec, you did that perfect. You could maybe have cleaned the plastic a bit better." But it's the different recycling bins for ours, and it's just at that age where you just want things. I don't know. It's all about your home, isn't it? Because a cottage, it is a home. That's the thing. It's like a house is not a home. As Burt Bacharach and Hal David wrote, a house is not a home, but if you're living there and somebody else is living there, and the people, we met the owners, and I don't really like meeting the owners when you hire a cottage. It's a bit kind of, it's a bit oppressive, and if they're weirdos, it puts you off the cottage. But they seem really nice, and what a lot of work they'd put into the place. So, but it's different. People that are staying there every week, but they're all making it their temporary home. So it is a home. It's really weird, but it's home away from home. And I get back to my actual home in Glasgow on Friday night, and then Saturday morning took the car back into Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is just off St Enoch's, right in the city centre. And as I was walking back, let's just do something, and I knew I could be there. I could be at Murrayfield. I had plenty of time. Obviously, it's a massive stadium, Murrayfield, and the crowd eventually was like 56,000 or 54,000, something like that. It holds well over 60,000 Murrayfield, so I could have gone along, got a spare ticket on the day. I had no interest whatsoever. So I was feeling a bit sheepish about that, but we wanted to still try and do holiday stuff, even though we're back in Glasgow. Wife's a teacher, so she's got plenty of days off still to go. And it's that thing where it isn't, you're trying, but it isn't really a proper holiday. So we're going to, just trying to avoid going to the booze and getting wrecked, basically. So let's try and do holiday stuff first. It's quite early in the morning. And so cut back up Hope Street, and there's the guy, the ScotRail guy, and he's like, hey, up here for Troon, folks, Troon, up here for Troon. And there've been all these pride as I'm driving along towards the Enterprise Rent a Car. What's that street called again? The Enterprise Rent a Car's on Oswald Street. I'm driving along towards that, looking along the side of the Clyde. I see all the folk with the kind of fancy hairdos and that, and I saw the rainbow flags, and it's like, oh, it's a pride march today, They're all coming towards us, and that's cool. Never actually been in the city centre for Pride, and I think they're all south of the river that the march was obviously starting. And I'm walking up and there's people coming at the station. I thought, this guy's going to say to us, this ScotRail guy is going to say Pride March this way, because I look so kind of androgynous. I'm always really careful with my pronouns and what have you. People looking at me and are thinking, guy's a bit camp. Is it a guy? Is it a girl? Really don't really know. So I was getting, he's like, Troon, you going to the golf? I look like a golfer. That's what he's basically saying. I look like a flipping golfer, like the most bigoted, kind of homophobic and sexist bunch of bastards on God's green. I'm only joking. A lot of folk love their golf and that, but I wasn't wearing any slashings. I wasn't wearing V-necks or anything like that. No, but I look more like a golfer than somebody who's going to go on Pride. So I was a bit disappointed with that, a bit ruined. And so we went to got a coffee and that kind of thing. Then we went to the Gallery of Modern Art and thought, we'll go and see exhibitions. You're on holiday, you go into cathedrals and you go and see art exhibitions and stuff like that. Why don't we do it in our home city? So years since I've been in the Gallery of Modern Art, and we went, beautiful exhibition. I only saw one of the exhibitions, that was enough, just spent a lot of time there. And just come out, and we come out just as we came out of the Gallery of Modern Art, just as the Pride Parade was coming up Queen Street and turning along Ingram Street. You're facing just down Ingram Street when you come out the Gallery of Modern Art. And, everybody's there with the pride flags and what have you. But I just thought, this is offensive, this sickens me. These folk are disgusting. It's against God's law. It's unnatural. And really, I feel kind of sick to my stomach that they think they can parade about our city, displaying their lifestyle choice, because between me and the Pride March was a bunch of Man United fans, absolutely sickening. Just going about there with a big we're men in their 40s wearing actual Manchester United replica shirts, all that sickening. I've always had a bad childhood and what have you. Some of them with Scottish accents. That was the main thing for me. The minute it was announced we're playing Manchester United at Murrayfield, you knew it was more of a Man U home game than a Rangers home game, didn't you? It's part of the tour things that the big clubs do, although it's from Manchester City are playing Celtic. It's almost like we play Hibs, Celtic play Hearts and I think it's that kind of weirdness. Man City are playing Celtic, I think tonight or last night, whatever. But yeah, Man U, it was the reserve team they put in, they beat us 2-0, but I had no interest whatsoever in going there. And I think what really bothers me with Manchester United fans, it was okay the couple of times we played them in the Champions League. Okay, I mean, bad because they beat us 1-0 both times, but I remember being at the second one, being outside, and they start like, we're Man United, we'll do what we want. That pisses me off. I'm in no way capable of football violence, never mind interested in football violence, but that was one night I was kind of thinking about it. I was just kind of, it just so happened, I just happened to walk into that. There's a big crowd of them outside the Brimlin, the back of the Brimlin, and the police intervened to stop me having a heart attack and making a complete, or getting a total doing. It kind of went off slightly, as they say in all these hooligan porn documentaries that you see. But that's one time I quite approved of them getting hunted, because but at the same time it was their hooligans, it was guys that were properly up for it, proper Man U hooligan. There wasn't a lot of jerseys on there. It was winter time, what have you. But at least they had the self-respect to come to Ibrox, know what Ibrox is all about. We took the Stretford end in the 70s. Was it Ali Forsyth testimonial? It was just before my time, but I remember my uncle's mates in the bus when I was a kid talking about it. straight across the pitch, Stretford end, took Stretford end. I've always quite liked that. But what I hate is, for example, I didn't go to the game on the Saturday. I didn't go to 2 games on the Saturday where we beat Manchester United with David May, own goal. Cantona gets sent off. It's back in the mid-90s. Kind of 4-team tournament, Newcastle, Rangers, Sampdoria. I was at the game on the Friday night. We're 2-0 up against Sampdoria and get beat 4-2. The other game was Newcastle against Manchester United. But I'm sitting, that was the first time I think the enclosure had been seated. They'd been seated that summer. There'd been work done to Ibrox that summer. And there I was at a pre-season friendly and all been completed. And I'm sitting in the seat and there's a guy in front of me with a Manchester United top on. And in fact, it was the East enclosure. I was in the East enclosure. I'm like, what the fuck? But yet we're sitting there, it's just, you're forced to take part in their kind of Star Wars, Dominoes, Budweiser kind of idea of football and life. And it is, I might have mentioned this in the previous pod, but it really pisses me off. They're absolute tourists. But I think what really gets me is the fact that I'm from Ardrossan. Rangers are from Glasgow. My local team is Kilmarnock. My local senior team is Kilmarnock, and a lot of other football fans in Scotland, fans of other teams in Scotland, see me as the equivalent. They see me the way I see those kind of Manchester United fans who I had no interest in being in Murrayfield. And the pictures I've seen of the 2 goals that we lost, they're all dotted in together. There's, Rangers fans and Man U fans all mixed in. It's, I like the fact that football's safe these days. I have no way approve of football violence, but it's just somebody sat next to you being really loud about how they like Manchester United. It's the fact that if I did that at somebody else's stadium, I would get a doing. I've got to sit there and just let these people be pains in the arse in Scotland while watching this English club that some of these guys I saw on Saturday were like 20 years old or stuff like that. I've been watching football for 47 years. I was going in the 70s and 80s. My terraces were absolutely toxic, and these guys are just sitting there. It's just the same as watching box sets and HBO or something like that. Anyway, I'm glad I wasn't there. It turned out we were terrible anyway, and we've got no idea what Rangers are going to be set up like as the season goes on, because we're going to have to buy a lot of players in the next couple of days. We're going to play Birmingham City tonight. I approve of that much more. That's going to be fine. It's particularly the cause, or the man we're going to be commemorating, Mr. Trevor Francis. What a player! He's going to be the centre of attention tonight, and there's a terrible thing that happens with Rangers. We've got a certain reputation. I mentioned us taking the Stretford end. Around about that period, we also took the Holt end at Villa Park, and we also remember that Fairs Cup semi-final. This applies to Birmingham Fairs Cup against Newcastle United in 1969, just a few years before, back at that time. And a bit of a reputation, and there's other reputations at Rangers. For example, on Saturday or the weekend, we're going to be playing Union Berlin in Berlin. Everybody's seen that programme behind me. I know my camera's back to the front, what have you, but it's a Union Berlin programme from, let me just see this, what was it, October? It was October 2003. October 2000, 26th October 2003, I was at the stadium of the Old Foresters' home in the Köpenick district of Berlin. And it was a brilliant day. I think was that the first time I'd been to Berlin? It was the first time I'd been to Berlin a few times. And I saw Union Berlin, we're at home, never seen Hertha. But I went to see Union Berlin down in Köpenick, and it was because it was a Sunday, it was actually a slow service with the trains, and I think it took about 2 hours to get from the centre of Berlin to Köpenick. But it's all boys getting bevied and that, you're getting to Old East Berlin, so there's a bit of, bit more atmosphere, shall we say. It wasn't very hipster. It's very seriously hipster now, but it wasn't so much at that point. Some seriously scary dudes and lassies on those U-Bahns and S-Bahns and what have you, but it was great in the stadium at that point in time. It was still all terracing, it's still terracing around 3 sides, but they had the old kind of ramshackle stand and it was uncovered. And it's the most German experience that's ever happened. I've been to Germany, I don't know, a dozen times or something like that, but the most German thing, that's the most stereotypically German thing that ever happened to me was they had one of those, it's basically like a lamb, a whole lamb in a bun. I'm having some of that. That's what they're serving at half time. And because it's the Stadion der Alten Forsterei, the old Forester's house, it's surrounded by trees. This is October, we're heavily into autumn. It was peeing down and all the leaves were on the ground. Long story short, Union Berlin, they were bottom of the Zwei Bundesliga, the bottom of the second Bundesliga, bottom of the second tier. I don't think they won a game all season, and they were playing Arminia Bielefeld, who were they were top of the second tier at that time, and they beat them 1-0, and it was a great day. It was just absolutely fantastic. What an atmosphere. A great wee stadium as well. But at half time, we went to get a drink, and then you could get the Glühwein as well, drinking some of that. It was fantastic. But at half time, I went to get myself a beer, and I got myself one of these, sheep and a brioche, or whatever you call it. Absolutely brilliant. And there's a really old stadium, big concrete steps to get back up onto the terrace, and I put my foot on one really particularly wet leaf, leg right up in the air, and I was thinking to myself, and my wife was with me, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm either going to have to drop this beer or this, sheep in a bun, or I'm going to have to go in my arse here, because there was a railing for the stairs was right next to me as well, and I thought, I'm keeping this beer and this beer, and I just took the fall. I took the hit, and it was actually a pretty superb balancing act, but it meant I went on my arse. Pretty fat, as you would imagine at that time as well, if a bit younger. And there's guys just, guys who are half pissed from the beautiful beer you get at German football all around about me. And I'm thinking, I am going to get slagged. It's just going to be, whoa, slag the waiter or whatever like that. What are you going to do for your next trip? It's going to be the German equivalent. I am going to get slagged into the ground here. The only person who slagged me was my wife. She's like, stay at you! Wait! You know what I mean? While all these thousands of German football supporters, East Germans, Union Berlin fans were just giving it, well, it is very slippy. Obviously, he's stood on a particularly slippy leaf, and that's what's caused him to fall. He's chosen to keep a hold of his drink and the sheep in a bun thing that he's got. If he'd wanted to sacrifice one of them, he could probably have grabbed the railing, but he hasn't done that. It's happened to us all, and I can see why it's happened to him. It was the most practical, pragmatic reaction, even from a bunch of pissed up hooligans that I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely beautifully German, and I had a great day. I loved it. In the queue to get back into the Kopernik U-Bahn, I heard a bus, like a local bus went past, a corporation bus. I'm still holding that bun. It's so beautiful. I'm telling this story, still holding the bun and still holding that Stein. It went past, and it was sponsored by Hertha Berlin, so it's covered in Hertha Berlin stuff, and the big German beer bottles flying through the air, whapping off this bus. All women with their shopping, just wanting to get the bus back home, and I'm thinking, this is pretty tasty. This is the full proper experience. But it was a fantastic day. And I remember getting back into the Kudamm, Kurfürstendamm and all that, and the guys doing a thing like Eisern, that's Eisern, the irons, Union. It sounded like onion, the way the Berliners were shouting it, and they're up and down the street. It been a great day for them winning this game. And they're shouting, Eisern, onion, Eisern, pure random. It was absolutely beautiful. But now they're playing Rangers, and I've had 21 years of really liking Union Berlin, and it's probably going to end at the weekend. They're very politically aware, German football fans. There's probably going to be a massive Celtic, tifo coming out there, something about a United Ireland, or there'll be something anti-Rangers, I'd imagine, amongst the Union Berlin fans, and it's just going to be, that's sad. I mean, they're quite right to express themselves however they want, but I bet you we're going to fall out with them, and it's a thing that can happen. You can like a team from a distance, you can like a kind of neutral, a team that's out with the whole Scottish hate ball, a foreign team, and English teams are foreign as far as football's concerned in Scotland, but and then you play them in Europe or whatever, and you've got to kind of let it go, So I'm enjoying my last few days of liking Union Berlin. Birmingham City, not so scared about that, not so worried about that. I think that's going to be fine. Trevor Francis obviously is the main man, so he unites both clubs. I don't know, some clubs down south, maybe Everton for example, are quite happy to tell you can shove your fucking England up your arse, and other ones quite like the Rangers fans have the Union Jacks and all that kind of thing, so they're probably going to get on anyway. And I also went to Birmingham City. I had a wee trip down there about 2007, 2008. They drew one each with Wolves, and it was a great, again, I don't know why bottles getting thrown in violence makes it a great day. It makes it more real, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm slagging the Man U fans. I'm even more pretentious, just in another way. But I went down there. There was a kind of 12 o'clock kickoff. I drove down, left here about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I had my sandwiches in a car park somewhere in Birmingham. And Went down there to see this derby with Wolves. It was one each, really good atmosphere. I'd never been to St Andrews, and I was kind of one of many grounds in England I was going to where it was kind of plasticky, literally, because I'm sitting on the seats in terms of the fans, because I was thinking about their massive cop, the grounds in the Midlands, Molyneux, the South Bank, the Holt End, at Villa Park, and even West Brom, the Hawthorns, beautiful mass terracing back in the kind of 70s and the 80s, but much needed Taylor report. We needed to get these grounds to make them safe. But St Andrews was a particular. You see pictures of St Andrews in the old days with that massive cop that goes right along the side and right round behind the kind of home end. Really intimidating, but just a gargantuan terrace. And by the time I got down there, they'd seated the whole thing. It was all seats and beautiful. But what a lovely atmosphere, real family atmosphere. Just so if you're sitting in the right bit, I was sitting kind of on the halfway line. It was a good seat. At half time, the folk running about me, they're not going for pies and what have you. They're all cracking open the sandwich boxes, and I think the Bovril obviously was doing the rounds. Go to Birmingham, you got to get the Bovril in there. But yeah, they were offering me a sandwich and stuff like that, and it was really nice. Folk are yapping. They've got what do you call it, the flasks. It was just lovely, absolutely lovely. So I had worked out, because that game kicked off early. It was a TV game. I could get to the second half of West Brom against Burnley, and I'd never been to Hawthorns before. I could get to that if I was quick off the mark at the end of the game. And I was so intent on doing that I slipped out of my usual mindset when I go to a game at a ground I've never been to before, particularly in another country, where I'm looking for, watch what street you go down, try to see if there's any trouble happening, be aware of that kind of thing. Don't walk into something. I was so intent in getting, I know what the car is, I know I've walked out the route to get to the Hawthorns for here, to get to this other game, that I walked right into the back of, is it the Subway Army, they call themselves, the Wolves mob, just as they were being ambushed by the Zulu. The Zulu Army, the Birmingham City hooligans. And it was if you get in the back of St Andrews at one point, there's a wee, there's a railway line, of course, going near the ground, and it goes over goes over the road. So there's a wee tunnel going under the railway track, and then up the side of that, just up the side of the railway track, a beautiful looking wee boozer, from what I remember. With the benches outside and what have you, it was all kind of painted like pink or something like that. It looked like a lovely place you would go for a wee bar meal on a Sunday lunchtime. But they were like that, with the Zulu were in there, and they were just lobbing these, what was it called? It was a type of cider. People get, there's like a trends of drinking. Was it just bottles of Magner? Folk get into Magners, and was it bottles of Magners they were drinking, pint bottles? But there was another kind of, I can't remember it, a kind of pretentiously, it's like Avian or something like that, a pretentious name, but it was big, massive bottles that you got it in. This cider, and these the Zulu boys were just lobbing them out, and luckily we're putting a lot of air in them, so I could see them cut. You could kind of dash out the way. But I always remember this wee Subway Army, Tube Army, I don't know what they're called, the Wolves hooligans. This wee guy in front of us, and he'd all the black gear on, the Stone Island gear, and then the kind of Burberry Wolves colours, kind of the Burberry, the gold, kind of works out well for them. And it was great. He was like, he'd have given me a total down if I'd taken him to task. He's obviously a contender, but he was greeting with rage because he couldn't get the rest of the troops to charge. He couldn't get them to go and take them on. He's like, they're winning, they're going to win. And it's like they were getting run. I think, again, I've been watching my fair share of Danny Dyer programmes. I think they were getting run by the Zulu. This counted as a loss, and of course, he doesn't know it's me. Doesn't know it's me being right at the heart of them. Not only a coward when it comes to physical confrontation, but just a jinx, a massive jinx. And I remember that boy really upset. But anyway, I got to see the second half of West Brom against Burnley. Tony Mowbray's West Brom. But Birmingham City, Trevor Francis, that was at his debut. A guy who scored the winner in the 1979 European Cup final. That kind of player I never thought I'd see at Rangers. And his debut, of course, September 87, 4-0. 4-0 we beat Dunfermline that day. We gave him a doing anyway. And him and Souness were just having a total loving, a total we're a class above. We've both played Serie A. We've both played European Cup finals, at the old Champions League final, that as kids. Knocking it about between themselves and dispute. And Trevor Francis did this thing in that game. I've talked about it before. I talked about it at the time that he died. Far too young, even for Trevor Francis. Guy's unbelievably fit. 69 is no age for a guy like Trevor Francis. Real shock when he passed away. He did a thing in that game, which to this day, there's very few things I have seen footballers doing that I can't work out how they did it. Now, I don't mean for a second that I could ever do it, but there's various things footballers do that you can, you could set up a set of goals at your back door, and without anybody there to stop you doing it, without any opposition players, you could maybe reenact really slowly what it didn't. Like, you could flick the ball up in the air and miss it 25 times, but one time you'll catch it just right, and it'll be a slowed down, kind of pathetic version of what that player did on the park. But there's very few times. You remember the Dennis Bergkamp one? Dennis Bergkamp, that goal he scores against Newcastle. The boys played into him and he just, I don't know what he flicks. Is it Albert? He flicks it around. I feel a bit Albert. And no, he's still, I've watched it a million times. It's one of the greatest goals I've ever seen in my life. But the way he flicks it around him, I still have trouble working out exactly what is going on there. Well, Trevor Francis, and I've watched the highlights, the sports scene highlights of that game against, no, it's a Scottish sport highlights, it's Jock Brown. It's talking to him afterwards. They're on YouTube. I've watched them, and it doesn't show this bit. It doesn't show this. I didn't imagine it. I did not imagine it, but he turns this guy inside out by doing something the like of which I have never seen before. The kind of thing that would just give you a hernia straight away. It would kill you even when I was like 17, 18, watching that game. But no, I still to this day, I can't work out what it was he did, but it was absolutely breathtaking, and he's a breathtaking player. And his next game for Rangers was away to Dynamo Kiev. And then a couple of weeks later, he's playing against Dynamo Kiev at Ibrox, and we score that goal where the opening goal comes from their goalie throwing the ball off one of his defenders' backsides by mistake, and Mark Falco just kind of rolls it into the empty net. An absolute disaster for Dynamo Kiev. But the second goal is Ali McCoist. He's heading in a ball that's been headed across by Mark Falco, headed across it, but that comes from a beautiful ball played from the right wing right up to the back of the left-hand post, the far post, by Trevor Francis. And that's the guy, I remember him scoring the winner in the 1979 European Cup final. It's the third European Cup final I remember watching it live, and it was his first game. It was his first game for Nottingham Forest in Europe. His first ever European football match. I remember Jasper Carrott, to show my age here, but I'm so old that I remember Jasper Carrott was an edgy comedian. I remember as a kid him doing the joke about Trevor Francis was so fast that he had to wear specs. He was so fast going down the wing, he had to wear specs with windscreen wipers on him to get rid of all the dead flies. He was travelling so fast down the wing. 9 years at Birmingham City before he went to Nottingham Forest, the first £1 million player in England and Britain. And then he's the first goal he scores is a winner in the European Cup final. Absolutely fine. In the Olympic Stadium against a Malmo team for which Robert Pritz is playing. Robert Pritz, who went to Atalanta. Trevor Francis, who we signed from Atalanta. That's Robert Pritz also played for Verona, and the only time I saw Atalanta in Bergamo, they were playing against Hellas Verona, but I'm taking that too far. But I can't help taking it too far because there's so many connotations here. That 78-79 European Cup, Forest beat Malmo in the final, but they beat Cologne in the semi-final, an epic semi-final, after Cologne had beaten us in the quarter-final. And the quarter-final took place at an Ibrox that was getting rebuilt, and it got delayed for a day because there was snow on the pitch on the Wednesday, so the game get played. A European game on a Thursday night. It was wild, and it was live on the telly as well. That was also particularly wild in those days. See, I was only like 9 years old at the time, but I remember it well, watching it with my grands for some reason. And the Copeland Road was getting rebuilt. There's a picture yesterday up, I don't know if it's Rangers Archives or somebody just showing the Copeland Road. The frame is built, but the actual Copeland Road itself isn't built. But we're going to Hampden because the Copeland Road is still, there's work taking place on that same Copeland Road stand just now. Dynamo Kiev beat Partizan Belgrade 6-2 last night with 6 different goal scorers, and that's who we've been drawn against. The winners of the Dynamo Kiev Partizan Belgrade's second qualifying round in this season's Champions League. We will play the winners of that in the third qualifying round, and it looks like it's going to be Dynamo Kiev. Now, that's not to say, I mean, Tommy McLean, I think, scored for Rangers that night against Cologne. I think he scored a kind of consolation goal against, was it Tommy McLean? On the night, Cologne were putting us out. Big Dieter Müller scored for them after we lost 1-0 in the first leg. Was it Dieter Müller? He scored maybe in the away leg, I don't know. But Tommy McLean scored for us, and Tommy McLean, I don't know if he scored, but he certainly took part in the game where Kilmarnock were at one point in the second leg at Rugby Park in the Fairs Cup. They were 4-0 down. They were 4 goals down to Eintracht Frankfurt, and they beat Eintracht Frankfurt 5-1 on the night to come back, one of the greatest comebacks in the history of European football. So it's not to say that Partizan Belgrade aren't going to go through, but it's looking very much like we're going to be playing Dynamo Kiev for the second time in Europe. We put them out famously that night, and we moved the pitch. That was a great thing. I think I remember I was in the West Enclosure that night, and I remember walking up to, there used to be a fella with a big port wine stain on his face who sold the programmes. The programmes are just is it Mafeking Street, that bit? You come off Copeland Road, past the old Rangers shop that used to sit in the corner, Copeland Road, and you up Mafeking Street up towards the back of the Copeland, and he's selling we're getting the programmes off, and he's going, Souness has shortened the pitch, or Souness has shrunk the pitch, and me and my mate Norky, we're like, oh, right, aye, okay, sure mate, thinking, guy's gone, you know what I mean? And we get inside, and you can see Souness had moved the pitch inside, because we're playing against the great Dynamo Kiev side, one of many Dynamo Kiev sides under Lobanovsky. And Lobanovsky, their manager, is just an absolute genius of a manager. And just 18 months earlier, he'd won the Cup Winners' Cup with Dynamo Kiev, and he'd Oleg Blokhin and Igor Belanov in that side. 2 Ballons d'Or, 2 European Footballers of the Year on the park that night, as well as Kuznetsov and Mikhailichenko, who would end up at Rangers. I remember watching Oleg Kuznetsov playing for Dynamo Kiev and the Soviet Union at that time on television and thinking, Christ, imagine Rangers going for a player like that. And he ends up signing for us, and of course his career getting cut short by injury. But he had a magical debut, but he couldn't beat us that night. And Souness had basically shrunk the pitch so they couldn't be as expansive. We could get them and get in about them, try and stifle their expansive football. This time we've moved the pitch to Hampden. We've completely moved it. And I don't know about you. It's time to, I think, not forget, but we know how bad it is that we're having to play at Hampden. We know that it's a major rick by the board, by whoever, the fact that we're not playing at Ibrox. We can't play at our home stadium. It's going to cost us money as well, but we don't have a lot of time. We're struggling to get players, and we're going to have to create an atmosphere. But I personally, I'm really looking forward to the idea of playing Dynamo Kiev or Partizan Belgrade at Hampden. I find that magical. I find it utterly magical. I was at Hampden for the 2002 Champions League final, Real Madrid against a German team. Real Madrid against Bayer Leverkusen. And that was beautiful because this was Real Madrid coming back to where they'd won the European Cup most famously in 1960, beating a German team, Eintracht Frankfurt, who'd given us a record down in the semi-final. And this was them back at that stadium, that famous venue, and they won it again. This time it wasn't the 7-3 that they won the game by back in 1960. And it certainly wasn't 127,621 people there. They tell you it's 135,000. They printed 135,000 tickets. That was the capacity at Hampden at that point, 1960. But only 127,621 actually turned up. Sometimes you'll see it rounded up to 130,000 as well, but it's 127,621. 18th of May 1960, the ball was a Tomlinson tee. There was no more than 17 minutes between any of the 10 goals that were scored in that game, and the BBC coverage actually shuts off. They lost the connection to the cameras at Hampden, and miraculously it doesn't miss a single goal. But then, if you remember, there was the woman who used to do the coffee adverts. She was a bit of a babe back in the day. I was a kind of young guy at the time, but she did was it the manageress? She was it was this documentary, Cherry Lungi. It was a dramatisation, the idea that there could be a female football manager of a male team. And she was trying to talk like she was a proper football fan, obviously. And she said to somebody, and the one thing about that guy is, he's also got the full 90 minutes of Real against Eintracht, the European Cup final. And he can't have. Because I've got the video of Real Madrid against Eintracht for the 1960 European Cup final, and nobody in the world has got the full 90 minutes on video because the coverage actually broke down. So there's about 10 minutes that's actually missing. But miraculously, it wasn't a 10 minutes in which a goal was scored. That was the only time a man has scored 4 goals in the European Cup final, Ferenc Puskas. And, Di Stefano also scored a hat-trick. There's only been 4 hat-tricks ever scored in the final of the European Cup or Champions League, and 2 of them were scored at Hampden that night, the 18th of May, 1960. But that's European Cup, that's European football, that's Hampden as the biggest crowd ever for a European final that night, biggest crowd ever for a European club final that night. Absolutely amazing venue. And to have Dynamo Kiev there, what happened that night when I was there, the only time I've ever been to the European Cup / Champions League final on the old Rangers end, Before the game, Lobanovsky had just died a few days beforehand, or a few weeks maybe. He died kind of mid-May, I think, of 2002, and it was a tribute to him. UEFA put up a tribute to him on the screens at Hampden before that game kicked off. And Dynamo Kiev, this is an argument I love having with myself. I think Rangers are right in this argument. Which club most deserves to win the European Cup or Champions League that hasn't already? Not in terms of what players have they got, how much money have they got, just in terms of what it means to the fans, what they are as a club, what they've been as a club through the whole period from the mid-50s of European club competition. I think Rangers are right up there because we've got to live with Celtic, going on about it all the time. They've been in the final twice. For me, right now, it's Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid are the only club to have reached more than 2 finals of the European Cup / Champions League and not win it. So and the way they've lost the 3 finals they've been in, like one after a replay, after suffering a 120th minute equaliser, other one on penalties, the other one, the third one was in penalties, and they were winning the 2014 final against Real. I mean, they've been beaten in the final. It pisses us off that Celtic, have won the European Cup and we haven't. They've been at the final and we haven't. But Atletico Madrid lost 2 of their 3 finals to Real Madrid. The other one they lost to Bayern Munich wearing all white in 1974, the only European Cup final to go to a replay. But the one in between, they were beaten, at the Estadio da Luz in Lisbon. They were beating Real Madrid, that Godin goal, right up until the very last minute. And Real Madrid equalised and took it away from them in extra time. So Atletico Madrid deserve to win the European. They're probably the team most. But in terms of teams that never reached the final, that should reach the final, we get well pasted, a record pasting by Eintracht in that 1960 semi-final. But we're a goal away from the final again in 1993. But we need it. We really need it. I think it's probably Dynamo Kiev that are next, because there's a stat I've read, and I haven't checked this out, but it sounds about right, that outside the top 7 leagues, the big 5 leagues, and then you get the Portuguese and the Dutch league, there's only one team has ever reached the semi-final of since the Champions League went to letting, was it 97, 98 season, started letting more than one team per country in, other than the holders and a different league champion. The only team from outside those top 7 leagues that's been in the semi-finals of the Champions League is Dynamo Kiev. And I remember I was in Italy at the time. I was in Rome. I'm watching in my hotel room in Italian, the commentary, and Dynamo Kiev were 3-1 up at the home leg, the Olympic Stadium, playing Bayern Munich after park. But Bayern Munich, and they come back and drew the game on the night. They scored 2 late goals to draw the game in Kiev, and then they beat them 1-0 in the second leg. But that was the 3rd time, a couple of times the European Cup, Dynamo Kiev got to the semi-final stage, and a lot of times they were combating against the fact that because in Ukraine, Moscow, the Soviet Union as it was back then, pre-Glasnost, the season was running, had to stop the extra summer season, so they're running at a different time to European club football because the weather was so bad in that part of the world. They had to, the season had to go from spring to autumn as opposed to autumn through to spring like ours, like most of the big clubs that win these trophies. So they're combating against that, but irrespective of that, they won the European Cup Winners' Cup twice, both times under Lobanovsky. He'd 3 or 4 spells as manager of Dynamo Kiev, in between spells as manager of the Soviet Union, during which he employed mostly Dynamo Kiev players. But he won it in 75 with them. They beat Ferencváros in the final, and had Ferencváros of Hungary beaten them, they would have become the first, and to date probably the only, Eastern European team to have won 2 European trophies, because they'd already won the 1965 First Cup. But Dynamo Kiev beat them. Oleg Blokin scored one of the goals that night in Basel, and then 11 years later, again under Lobanovsky, they win the Cup Winners' Cup again. Still to date the only Eastern European side to win 2 European trophies, and they beat them. They beat Atletico Madrid, of all teams, in the final in Lyon, and they destroyed them. And I remember I watched that one on television, and you can still see it on YouTube. The goals are just, they're like robots. They've been trained in all sorts of scientific ways that have been recorded in various books and what have you, but they were basically psychic. They just knew where their teammates were going to be all the time. It was a form of total football, which, when it worked, was mesmeric. They weren't looking, they're just passing to guys. They're passing. I think it's the second goal they score. It's just like 3 or 4 psychic passes in the build up to that goal. They walk the ball into the net. It's absolutely magical. They beat Atletico Madrid 3-0 in that one, going on for them, and blocking scored again. It's happened a few times, guys have scored in the Cup Winners' Cup final like 11 years apart. There's 2 or 3 guys that have scored in the Cup Winners' Cup final a decade apart, but that's their only European finals. We've played in 5 European finals, but only won 1. We've played in 3 Cup Winners' Cup finals. They've only played in 2, but they won the 2 of theirs. We've only won the 1 of ours. I think there's a real kind of match there, a kind of spiritual match between ourselves and Dynamo Kiev, always in the cup. Partizan Belgrade, who might yet go through. You never know what's going to happen in the second leg. I say they went down 6-2 last night in Lublin because Dynamo Kiev, because of the conflict with the horrible bastards that are Putin's Russia. They're having to move. It was having to move to Western Ukraine or into Poland in Ukrainian football to try and stage games. So they played at Lublin, Poland last night. They won both halves by 3-1 and did 6 different goal scorers across the game. But Partizan Belgrade, another Cyrillic script, Eastern Orthodox Church club. They played in the first ever match in the European Cup. They played the first ever game in the European Cup. They drew 3 each with Partizan, with Sporting Club de Portugal, Sporting Lisbon, in September 1955, and that was played at Estadio Nacional. So the most famous game in the European Cup ever played in the Estadio Nacional, Lisbon. A team in green and white hoops, drawn 3 each with Partizan Belgrade, and they also, they ended up losing the final in 1966. They lost the final of the European Cup in 66, Partizan Belgrade, to Real Madrid claiming their 6th European Cup. Back then, Paco Gento, I'm going European football crazy because I love the European stuff. He claimed his 6th European Cup winners medal that night because they won the first 5 European Cups, 50, 60, 60 inclusive, and then they were back in the final. They lost the final in 62 and 64, but then they won it finally the 6th time in 66. 6th final in 66, and Paco Gento gets his 6th winners medal, something that was equalled by Carvajal at Wembley. And you thought, Carvajal's not the player Gento was, but he goes and scores a goal. He goes and scores against Dortmund at Wembley just to add to the magic that is Real Madrid. Much as you hate them, much as it's all about money, there definitely is a magic about Real Madrid. They are the European Cup / Champions League. But that was Gento won his 6th that night. The guy who scored the goal, they beat Partizan Belgrade 2-1 in the Heysel that night, and the guy who scored for Partizan Belgrade, and what a goal it is, you should look that up, Velibor Vasovic, he also scored for Ajax. He scored a penalty for Ajax in the 1969 European Cup final at the Bernabeu, and he became the first guy to score for 2 different teams in the final of the European Cup in so doing. But at Partizan Belgrade, remember that famous game at Parkhead, they put Celtic out of Europe, they were wearing Celtic's training shorts on the night, but it was at 5-4, Jakanowski got 4 goals for Celtic. So they've played at Parkhead and Ibrox. I saw them that night, that Alan Hutton, Paul Le Guen's Rangers in the old Europa League. They were talking about Souness moving the pitch and then Rangers moving the pitch to Hampden for this game. Well, that time there was only the games were only that particular edition or iteration of the UEFA Cup. You only played, it was short-lived, but you played, was it 5 games or 4 games? But you played 4 games, but you didn't play anybody twice. You just played a home game against some teams and an away game against other teams. So, we haven't played in Partizan Belgrade Stadium, and after this, if they get through, they still won't have played at Ibrox. if they get through to play us at the beginning of August in this round of the Champions League qualifiers. But we beat them 1-0 with Alan Hutton goal, and the beautiful thing about that night, apart from the fact that I got to get a European finalist off my list, off my Anorak list, seeing Partizan Belgrade for the one and only time in my life, the beautiful thing about that night was Rangers took to the pitch knowing we'd already qualified. That's one thing that's missed about the Le Guen, his European run. He was unbeaten in Europe, and it's the only second. I think have we done it again since then? I think we've done it again since then, where we actually played a European game. It was against the Poznan, Lech Poznan, did it against them in the COVID season. We've played a European group game. It's a dead rubber, not because we're already out, but because we're already through. And that was a beautiful thing that night. But Alan Hutton scoring the only goal of the game that night against Partizan Belgrade back in 2006, it must have been, because Le Guen only had 6 months in charge. But yeah, they've played Celtic. Both Dynamo Kiev, we're the first team to beat Celtic in any competition after they won the European Cup. Then Dynamo Kiev put them out of the European Cup this season after Celtic won it. I think they've played them in the Cup Winners' Cup as well before that, or maybe the previous season. the season previous to Celtic winning the European Cup, maybe. But Dynamo Kiev, basically, and Partizan Belgrade have both played in European football at both Parkhead and Ibrox. I think it'd be a beautiful thing to see a club of the stature of either of them, Partizan or Dynamo Kiev, at Hampden. I've seen the Ukraine. Since I go to most Scotland home games, I certainly go to Scotland home games at Hampden. I saw Ukraine first time back in the 2007, 2008ish. We beat them 3-1 in that 2008 Euro 2008 campaign under Walter, which then became under Alec McLeish. I think McLeish was the manager, and we beat them 3-1 on a Saturday afternoon at Hampden. Lee McCullough scored an absolute belt. I think Chris Boyd scored as well. Quite a staunch day that for Scotland. Need a bit more of that. And but then I've seen them, I think, since in the last 3 years. I've seen them at Hampden 3 times. I saw them in the last 16 of Euro 2020, beating Sweden. A late goal in extra time, Zinchenko. I saw them, I think he scored earlier. I don't think it was him that scored the winner. I saw them tanking Scotland in a World Cup playoff semi-final. And then I saw them getting tanked by Scotland shortly thereafter in the Nations League group game. So there must be Dynamo Kiev fans who've been to all 3 of the games. They'll know their way about Hampden. Just need to tell themselves, no, we can't go there in the Rangers. It's Rangers we're playing this time, so we're not going to the Rangers end. No, go to Kings Park Station. Don't go to Mount Florida. They must know Hampden like the back of their hand, which is more than a lot of Rangers fans do. But we will be going back there. It's not. We're going to Hampden and we're going to play Dynamo Kiev at Hampden. I think that's going to be an absolutely magical thing. The one thing I love about Hampden, when you're sitting there, the last game I went to last season, the last Rangers game, was the Scottish Cup final. Rangers at Hampden. The last game of any nature I went to last season was at Hampden. It was Scotland against Finland in that friendly before Scotland went off to the Euros. And the first game I will go to this season, probably, it looks like it, unless I'm still kind of on holiday and doing other things, but it's probably going to be Rangers against Motherwell at Hampden. Even Motherwell at Hampden. Motherwell beat, was it 1952 Scottish Cup final? Motherwell beat Dundee. It was 4-0. Motherwell won the Scottish Cup. So they beat Dundee and Dundee United in the Scottish Cup final. Motherwell. But the crowd was 130,000. It's the biggest crowd, I think, in Scotland that doesn't feature either Rangers, Celtic or the Scottish national team. The Scotland national team. It's this Motherwell against Dundee in the 1952 Scottish. No, Motherwell, obviously, we've got semi-finals, good and bad, in relatively recent memory against Motherwell at Hampden. So that's got a kind of, there's a cachet to that. Ross County, they beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup semi-final at Hampden. They won the League Cup against Hibs the same season we lost to Hibs in the Scottish Cup final. Ross County beat them at Hampden in the League Cup final. So there's, and I think Dynamo Kiev or Partizan Belgrade would fit right into that, would slot right into the magic of Hampden. It's elliptical. Last game last season, I'm at Hampden. First game this season, I'll be at Hampden. And when you're sitting at Hampden, right, the view of the pitch might be terrible, but take a look up. The first time I went to Hampden in 1980, I mean, half of it is unroofed. It was half of it was open. The Rangers end and the main stand had a roof on it. There was the old North stand, but with the North enclosure on the Celtic end, totally open to the elements, or terracing. They used to the drenched floodlights. Now, those drenched floodlights, I remember my dad's mate, Michael, saying to me on the bus, we're on the Reaper bus up to Hampden, Scotland, Portugal, European Championship qualifier 1980. It was October. My grandfather died the next day. My maternal grandfather died the next day, a few hours after that game finished. And we were on a bus run by a local pub, the pub nearest our house, and that pub's called the Reaper. My fucking grandfather died the next day. Anyway, it was 0-0 the game in the pissing rain. But I just remember Michael saying to me, leaning over on the bus, going, look for the flood. Do you see the floodlights? And it was, look at the big old drenched floodlights and the massive masts looking down at Hampden. The floodlights are on the fascias of the roof now at Hampden, but those floodlights were opened officially, the old drenched ones, in 1961, and it was Rangers against Eintracht Frankfurt. They made us, no replay the horrible semi-final, but Eintracht Frankfurt had a cachet about them in relation to Hampden because of what had happened in the previous year's European Cup final. Just the magnificence of that game. Folks, 7-3, really entertaining. And Rangers were supposed to, if we'd beaten Eintracht, we'd have got to the final at Hampden. Never came close to it, so you can't really call it a close one. But there we were playing Eintracht Frankfurt at Hampden. on behalf of Queen's Park, on behalf of the SFA, to officially open, there's over 100,000 there, to officially open the floodlights, the official opening of the Hampden floodlights. And later on that season, 60, in the kind of 1962, half of the 61-62 season, we did a tour of the Soviet Union, and we played Dynamo Tbilisi, Spartak Moscow, and Dynamo Kiev. And the only one we didn't beat, we drew one each with Dynamo Kiev, and we played them all. So it was basically, it's now Georgia, Russia, and the Ukraine, but in those days it was all the Soviet Union. And we beat them. Partizan Belgrade, if it is them or to play, they started Red Star Belgrade down them getting to that 66 European Cup final. They've got that the eternal derby with Red Star Belgrade, and Red Star Belgrade lost the 79 UEFA Cup final to Borussia Mönchengladbach, but that thing where Partizan had got to the final of the big one. But then, of course, in 1991, Red Star Belgrade, finally, they win the European Cup. They go one better than their rivals, and they did it via a wee trip to Ibrox, almost a tapping into our need to win the European Cup because Celtic had won it. They go there. I've subsequently seen Red Star Belgrade at Ibrox a couple of times in Europe. All quite interesting, intense ties, very entertaining stuff when we play Red Star Belgrade. But to see Partizan, it feels like I should see Partizan again. There's another coincidence in there. There's the fact that Dynamo Kiev, we're in the league path. If we get beat, and it looks like we could get beat the way Dynamo Kiev seem to be absolutely rocking, and Rangers just can't sign anybody. If we lose this game, we just go straight into the Europa League, all the European competitions. We've got the new Swiss-style group stage, which is an absolute nonsense, a farce as far as I'm concerned. But there's more games to be played, more money, if you like. But we would go straight into the Europa League. We wouldn't have to play a playoff round. But we're hoping to get into this game. We're hoping to get into the playoff round of the Champions League and eventually get ourselves through. If we did get through, we'd play. Who would we play? It's either 20, FC 20 from Holland, Lille, Red Bull Salzburg, I think Dynamo Minsk and Ludogorets. There's also a few teams it could be that we play. It's going to be quite a tough tie anyway, but not as difficult, I think, as PSV Eindhoven last season. But we don't have James Tavernier, who we scored 4 goals in the third qualifying round and playoff round of the Champions League last season, and Tav scored 3 of them, 3 different venues. So if we're getting rid of him, just be careful what you wish for. But I feel as if it's all set up. The coincidence is that because it's the league path, i.e. the teams who have qualified through their league position rather than being actual champions of their country, they're qualified for this stage of the qualifiers. Partizan Belgrade, it's Red Star Belgrade, won the League and Cup double in Serbia last year. Dynamo Kiev, Shakhtar Donetsk won the League and Cup double in Ukraine last year. And, Celtic won the League and Cup double in Scotland. So we're on a kind of the same position, the 3 teams. But I'm looking forward to whoever we play. I think it's going to be a magical night at Hampden if we can make it a magical night. It's that elliptical thing with the roof I'm talking about, and the floodlights being in the roof. If you just look, when I was sitting at the Scottish Cup final and I was standing at the Scottish Cup final at the start, just at kick off, and we're holding up the tifo on the Rangers end, and between the little bits of plastic we're holding up, I could look up at the sky and it's beautifully framed. It's beautiful. So the view of the pitch might be terrible, but the view of the sky at Hampden, that's not what you're supposed to be looking at the football, admittedly, but take it in. It's lovely. It's gorgeous. It really frames the sky. It's the roof goes, the main stand's bigger than the north stand and what have you, so it goes up and down the roof, but it's maintaining the same kind of footprint, obviously reflected up in the sky it's elliptical, the same as the pitch down below, and it reflects the fact that Hampden sits in 2 intersecting hills, and it's gorgeous, and things just, I belong to Glasgow, there's something the matter with Glasgow because it's spinning round and round, and that roof just goes round and round, and Ibrox used to be elliptical. Ibrox, when I first went to Ibrox, it was the same shape as Hampden is now. Rugby Park, Love Street, Parkhead, Broomfield. There's so many Scottish grounds. It's traditional shape of Scottish grounds. A lot of them built by Archibald Leach, a Rangers man who built all those beautiful stands. The one I sit in on my season tickets in at Ibrox. But he also designed so much of Hampden as well. And it's a beautiful shape. It does take me back to my childhood. Now I know if you've got a ticket for the Copeland, you're square on the pitch, you're much closer to the action, and now if you're in the Rangers end at Hampden for this, it's an absolute bastard because you're so much further away from the pitch. But I think we should just try and enjoy the moment, enjoy the situation, just enjoy the fact that I think it's home from home. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the cottage, holiday cottage, and that kind of thing. That's I was trying to get a smart arse there. It's like going to see the home of a favourite auntie or your favourite grandparents. We've had so much kind of emotional investment in Hampden. I know it's our second home, but I've played there. I've been to Hampden, I say, more times than anywhere else other than Ibrox. And you go to, although you go to Hampden a lot fewer times than you go to Ibrox. The games you're playing at Hampden, semi-finals and finals, there's necessarily more emotion attached to them than, I say, at least half the games you see at Ibrox, routine league games. So I think there is an investment there. There's a kind of surfeit of emotion that we've built up, and we can cash that in now and use that at Hampden. It's a home from home, but it's like a repository for more historic Rangers emotion than anywhere other than Ibrox. And it's more than just a random building. I think let's make it work for us as far as I'm concerned. Let's have Celtic fans moving from mocking us for not having Ibrox ready for the start of the season to, retrospectively later on in the season, trying to sue us, trying to tell the SFA that they should, take away the league title that we're about to win because we were allowed to host anywhere other than Ibrox. Let's, as the song goes, there's that Luther Vandross, love Luther Vandross, and he does a wee song. It's a 10-minute song. I'm a man another fat man who likes to do an epic, likes to go in too much, but it's a set piece. It's on YouTube. Is it Wembley? It's doing A House Is Not a Home, that Bacharach and David song, and it's was it a chair is still a chair, even if there's no one sitting there. But a chair is not a house, and a house is not a home until if there's no one there to hold you tight, and no one there that you can kiss good night. And he does this thing. It's in the round. It's in the Wembley Arena, Hampden, Wembley. It's Wembley Arena, and it's in the round. He's in the middle. The stage is in the middle of the auditorium. The crowd's all around him. He's got the microphone right in the middle, and just the spotlight on the microphone, and he's walking around the spotlight. He's getting into the shadows, and he just flash. And the build up, this convoluted build up to the song, he just kind of walks past and not singing any lyrics, just notes, just showing off his amazing vocal ability. And he's throwing these notes out there at the microphone, just going round and round, and these notes are spinning. The crowd are going crazy, and then he goes into this song, and it's like a loop. It's magical. It goes around, and there's plenty of. We Road, Hampden knows that we've opened our floodlights for them, and I know we played 2 Old Firm games there in the late 70s when we were first redeveloping Ibrox. But they kind of owe us, Hampden. We've put a lot of money into that stadium, so I don't think we need to feel guilty about the fact we're playing at Hampden. House is not a home, but this one is. It's a second home for us. And there's a point I'm trying to make. You can hear me struggling because there's something I was trying to make, and that's it. It's I'm into a thing called the Frankfurt School. It's just a whole bunch of German intellectuals who moved from Frankfurt to because of the war and what have you, New York, Chicago. Herbert Marcuse ended up in San Diego, and then they were back in Frankfurt. The Bauhaus. They've actually the name House in the Bauhaus. They were in Weimar, then went to Dessau, then they ended up in Berlin. They move around the place. Not like Grand Ole Opry. The Grand Ole Opry, it's only been in the building it's in for like 50 years or what have you. There's been 2 or 3 theatres that have hosted the Grand Ole. You get the National Theatre, it used to be in the Old Vic, and now it's in the South Bank. I just feel as if all great institutions will move house. Ibrox, as it is just now, is our 6th home, 5th home. This is the second Ibrox that we're in just now. It was completely redeveloped, kind of 78 to 81, completely redeveloped, but it was on the same site, the same footprint. Well, the footprint changes because we changed the nature of the stadium, but there was another one before that, but down towards where the Loudon is, the first Ibrox we were on. And they were at Burnbank, kind of West End, Fleshers Hall, Kinning Park. I'm missing it somewhere really obvious, but we're a few homes, so we shouldn't get too uptight just because we've been in Ibrox for so long about where we actually play, where we go is home. And I was going to do my memories of Hampden, all the different bits of Hampden that I've been to, but I'm not going to do that just now because I've already gone way over time. But I think the thing for me is we need to endure. You need to endure. It's a wee bit of hardship, and Ibrox it was never round, but it was certainly rounder. Rounder than it is just now. And Hampden remains one of three grounds with a Rangers and a Celtic end. You can't have one without the other. A Rangers end and a Celtic end. That back and forth kind of looping, it's like a wheel, a constantly spinning wheel, I think, which we nevertheless all reside comfortably above, maybe a bit like a wheel in a wheelchair, a fucking wheelchair. Which on the Rangers end, if we're talking about the Rangers end here, the Copeland Road being shut, there's a reason the Copeland Road is the way it is just now. 66 people, the families of 66 people. More than that, there's a few other people who died. Making their way from the old Rangers end, a few people, 40 people died in 1902 at Scotland England game up the other end at Ibrox. There was a disaster there as well. This kind of stuff prompted Willie Waddle to get that stadium of ours square and seated and sheltered and safe, and it was just making the way from the Rangers end down Stairway 13, which caused the tragedy. So putting supporter safety first in terms, I think that's not something we can overlook. I don't mind a wee delay. I think David Holmes said, we've got the Walter Smith statue, obviously, and David Holmes said that the stadium itself was the best monument possible to the people who died in accidents at Ibrox. Supporters who didn't make it home, but I think it's also beautiful that we've got the John Gregg statue as an actual physical memorial dedicated solely to those people that died. But I remember Juventus being beaten at a half-built Ibrox by a Rangers managed by John Gregg, with Willie Waddle in the boardroom, and Willie Waddle would just say, for fuck's sake, tough out a few months at Hampden for the sake of our wheelchair fans. We don't have the money to do stuff to the stadium if we're not doing it on the park. I get that, but if we've got the money, as we always have had to have Ibrox as it is just now, and now we've got Edmiston House and we've got Auchenhowie, but yet we've got our wheelchair fans on the track exposed to the elements and having a worst view in the house. I think that's something, you lose something far more than face or revenue. You lose sight of who we are and what Ibrox is all about, what we're all about. That's the one thing we always have to circle back round to. That's a real home, that kind of self-respect, that sense of responsibility, that sense of family, and dignity. So I think let's make it work for us, and let's have Dynamo Kiev holding tight, and let's make them kiss goodnight to their Champions League run at homely Hampden, the home of Scottish football, and as the biggest and best club in Scottish football, it's somewhere we should be proud to be.